Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Cass County Conversation. My name is Shannon Full. I'm the new president and CEO here at the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce, and want to welcome you today. This is my great pleasure in welcoming you all today to this conversation. As the new president of the chamber, I've had now the great opportunity to lead chambers all across the country for the last 21 years. But my husband and I and our two children are really happy, blessed, and honored to now call this fabulous region of Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo as our new home. We're looking forward to building upon the great foundation that's already been laid in place with the chamber, partnering with all of you, working alongside you, really to focus on continuing the growth and prosperity in our region. So welcome to all of you attending today. A special welcome to our members and a great thank you and appreciation to our panelists and our moderator. Also want to thank our tremendous staff here at the chamber. I've had the great opportunity in diving in and getting to know each of them over the last week, and there is a high level of passion and dedication of this team to work with you. So looking forward to this second day of our Legislative Preview Summit. We hope that you enjoyed the session yesterday. We've got two more sessions, one tomorrow and one on Thursday. You can use this same link to access any of those panel discussions as well. As you all know, advocacy is a significant strategic initiative for the chamber, has always been that way and will continue to be a major focus for us as we work with our legislators on pro-business policies that allow this region to continue to have the growth and prosperity that we so need. In addition to that, we're very grateful to the relationships we have with these elected officials on both sides of the river and both sides of the aisle. We also couldn't do this work without a tremendous group of dedicated volunteers. So thank you to our Public Policy Committee and the sponsors who make these advocacy efforts possible. So our 6 sponsors for today's events, AE2S, Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota, Bremer Bank, First International Bank and Trust, Moore Engineering Incorporated, and Sanford Health. Your sponsorships mean a tremendous amount for us, not just the financial investment that you make with us, but the human capital that you invest with us as well. Thank you also to our presenting sponsor, co-host and partner, the Primacy Strategy Group. As the presenting sponsor of the summit, policy experts with Primacy Strategy Group will moderate each of our sessions. So thank you to Primacy for the great collaboration, the great work that you're doing, not only in our region, but throughout the state. And you can learn more about Primacy just by visiting our website, FMWFchamber.com. So now I will turn it over to the real show. I'd like to welcome our moderator for this afternoon's Cass County Conversation, Rudy Martinson. Rudy's a member of the State and Local Government Relations and Regulatory Affairs team at Primacy, but is also the Executive Director for the North Dakota Hospitality Association. Rudy, thank you for agreeing to moderate this fabulous dynamic discussion, and we look forward to it.
Well, thank you, Shannon. Welcome, and as Blair said yesterday, welcome as well to the Fargo-Moorhead and West Fargo area. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you.
I would add to Shannon's comments that Primacy Strategy Group is proud to be the presenting sponsor of this multi-day policy summit and legislative preview. It fits well within our advocacy and policy area and also our regional footprint. So we are proud to be here and proud to be partnering with the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber on this project. As Shannon said, you can learn more about Primacy Strategy Group on either the Chamber's website or on our websites at primacysg.com. With that, we'll move into the meat of it today. We're excited to be having a conversation with some legislators a little closer to home from here within Cass County. Before we get started with that, we'll mention that if you have any questions for today's panelists, please submit them through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. The prepared questions have been prepared from input gathered from chamber members and policy conversations prior to the event. But if there is anything that comes up that you feel needs to be highlighted or would like us to put a finer point on, please feel free to use that Q&A feature, and we'll get to those at the close of today's conversation. So with that, I would like to welcome today's panelists. First, please help me to welcome Senator Judy Lee, who has served the people of District 13 in West Fargo in the Senate since 1995. Welcome, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to welcome Senator Ron Sorvag. Senator Sorvag was first elected to the Senate in 2011 and represents District 45 on the north side of Fargo. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you.
Next, please help me welcome Senator Jim Rohrer. Senator Rohrer represents District 46 from the south side of Fargo and has served since first being elected in 2017. Welcome, Senator Rohrer.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
And finally, welcome to Representative Carla Rose Hansen, who has served the people of District 44 on the near north side of Fargo since 2017 as well. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you very much.
So with that, I believe we'll dive directly into the topic area that is sort of on the minds of all North Dakotans at the moment. Not sort of, it's definitely on the minds of all North Dakotans at the moment, which is the issue of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Obviously, yesterday began the deployment of the first vaccines across North Dakota, which is a moment that we as citizens have all been waiting for. And hopefully will help us to get back to, running our businesses, living our lives, participating in society in a more normal fashion. This will be a question for the whole panel, and it's the same question that we asked the legislative leadership and the governor yesterday, but wanted to get a more zeroed in and local perspective from our Cass County representation on it. And the question is in two parts. We'll begin with Senator Lee. Essentially, now that the vaccine is being deployed, what role do you see for the legislature specifically or for the state in general in educating North Dakotans on the safety of the vaccine and the importance of getting vaccinated? And secondly, the same question we asked the governor and leadership yesterday, part two of the question is, when your turn comes up in line, do you intend to be vaccinated? So Senator Lee.
Thank you. I'm going to answer the second part first, and that is absolutely when my number comes up, so to speak, I will be right there in line. As someone who spent a lot of time in clinical laboratory medicine, I understand the science of developing this, and I have great confidence in the ability. It's really miraculous that short period of time has been taken to develop these several vaccines. I was reminded within this week that it took 20 years for Jonas Salk to develop the polio vaccine. And some of us have been around long enough to recall seeing iron lungs, which were a really bad thing. So I think our role as legislators is in one area to set an example, in another to be sure that we're well informed. We don't have to be experts. We just have to know that the process has not been accelerated. It's the paperwork that was accelerated here. And set an example for others in how we can see this having an absolutely positive impact over the months to follow in being able to return to a more normal life for both business and personal reasons.
Thank you, Senator. And I believe we'll go next to Senator Rohrer. Senator Rohrer, how do you see the role of the state on helping North Dakotans feel comfortable with the vaccine, and will you plan to take it?
Well, I will do as Judy did and say, absolutely. I'll be standing in line to get my vaccine as soon as possible. How do we see the state of North Dakota? I think in educating people into the value proposition of the vaccine, assuring the people that they have no concerns really to worry about with vaccines in general. I was fortunate in my younger days where I actually did research on the development of vaccines, and I frankly feel that it's a very safe way to tackle a pandemic like this. And I think that we as the state need to support that to make sure that everyone is comfortable getting vaccinated. So that would be my position.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Hansen, to you next.
Sure. So yes, I would definitely consider taking the vaccine. In terms of your question about the state's role, I think our Department of Public Health has played a very important role to date in educating the public on the importance of mask wearing. So I could see that continuing and extending with the importance of taking the next step and considering the vaccine for the public as well. I also think our public health, I should say our healthcare community also will play an important role. Doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, in terms of educating their patients in the importance and whether it's appropriate for the individual situation for different people. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Sorvag, you have the opportunity to clean up on this question.
Well, I think the state has to encourage it, and my answer is going to, it just changed in the last 10 days, because I'd always said I'd be first in line and happily, because I do have underlying conditions, but I also have, I actually come out of quarantine at midnight tonight. So I did catch COVID, and I'm a mask wearer. I was cautious, sanitizing things, and I still believe in doing all those. But I think the point being, no matter how careful you are, this thing can still slip by. All it takes is a small mistake. I have no idea where I got it, but I am at the end of it. My wife ended up, and we ended up luckily just minor colds. But yes, I hope people take it, because people are tired of this. That's the thing. I think we're all hearing that. And the only way we're going to move on is to get everybody either having it or vaccine. And we don't want everybody to have it, because it is ugly for some. So I hope people just use common sense and realize this is a bad, bad disease for certain people. So get it when it's available, take it. In my case, I guess I'm in the back of the line now, but just because you have, I'm still going to wear the mask. I'm still going to follow all the rules. And I hope people still do, because I still believe in the precautions. You just don't know what's going to happen next.
Thank you, Senator. And that's an important reminder and perspective, and best wishes on your continued good health and recovery. We will circle back to some more healthcare related issues a little bit later in the conversation, but here we wanted to also front load the conversation with some coverage of what is kind of the other large topic of conversation in the room at the moment. Yesterday on the panel with Governor Burgum and the legislative leaders, they outlined some budgetary plans that included a lot of very important areas, including, proposed bonding legislation, water topics, the energy industry, economic diversification. They covered quite a bit of ground. And so what we'd like to do also, the other thing that's kind of at the front of everyone's minds is the budget issues and the bonding bill, or proposed bonding bill. So I think we'll direct this question primarily to you, Senator Sorvag, and give the rest of the panel a chance to respond after that. But yesterday, again, and during his budget address a few weeks ago, the governor announced a plan to expand the usage of bonding in North Dakota in a much more expansive way than we have used it in the past. Given some of the local needs in the Fargo-Moorhead area surrounding water projects, particularly the diversion, FM water supply, along with other local infrastructure needs. The question is, do you support a bonding bill, be that the governor's proposal, or we also heard yesterday that the Senate and the House may be coming with alternative proposals there. So do you support the concept of the bonding bill? And particularly, what local priorities do you have to, should that pass, for local applications for that new access to dollars?
Well, it's a big question, but number one, yes, I do support the bonding bill. I supported the bonding bill last session, which was just an infrastructure bonding bill, which if you look at what the governor is proposing, his goes a little beyond just infrastructure, and what legislative leadership has been working on now for quite a few months too. And I don't know what details they went into. That's going to be coming out, but at the end of the day, they're going to be fairly similar. It's just the mechanism of how they go about it, whether it's through granting, loaning, they're going to have different mechanisms. The dollar amounts are going to be a little bit different. But I'm supportive of it because, number one, we need to put people to work. And bonding, especially for infrastructure, is critical to put people to work. Number two, it's the perfect environment to borrow money in. The interest rates are cheap. We have mechanisms to pay it back. And that's where you're going to see a difference in the governor and the legislation, how we pay it back. But it all comes out of the same big pot of money. And it all ties into the philosophical of, do you use tax dollars? Do you reinvest earning dollars? And I'll use a cliche I've used a lot, and I know it's old, but you know, there's a difference of spending money and investing money. And I really think if we borrow money for bonding, we're investing in our future. There's a return, whether it's keeping the burden off the local property tax or off the state end. We're getting things done and we're helping them out. And at the end of the day, we're all in the same pot. So yes, I'm a big fan of it. At what amount, how it's going to look, and you know, a lot of that's going to have to shake out yet. And it did go into a lot of different things, but there's just a lot of big needs. And I think, I mean, there's no question on water. The big one is the diversion. And it will help us because water going forward this next session, we are going to have some financial challenges by using solely the Resources Trust Fund, which has funded all water projects now for many bienniums. And part of the problem is our commitments were so high this last session that we're not going to be able to follow through on. And there's going to be a carryover of about 140 million short. So if we don't come up either with a revolving loan, bonding of some nature, we're going to have a tough time funding properly the big projects. And we've made commitments to doing them, or they're going to get funded and there's going to be nothing left for anybody else. And when I say the big ones, I'm talking about the diversion. I'm talking about Mouse River, which is basically Minot, the first few phases of their project. We've never really addressed anything more than that. And then the other big one in the room is the Red River water supply, which 2 of the 3 are critical to Eastern North Dakota in the future. So I'm hoping we're open to bonding. We haven't done, in my time, we really have done minimal. We did a little bit of higher ed bonding last time. There's revenue bonding and all that for dorms and that, but in this type of infrastructure bonding, I've never been part of it. And I hope we look at it between legacy earnings and the other different, whether you use the governor's model or you take the dollars you'd normally spend like Resources Trust and use it toward the line of credits. No matter which way you do it, I hope we're creative enough to look at it and to be able to go forward because it will help the budgeting. It frees dollars for other things. You just take example, some of the oil money the governor projected or wanted 500 million. We were at 3, last session went 4, now 5, using oil for operations of government. I don't know if I agree with that, but it does give us the freedom to look at a lot of these other opportunities. So end of the day, I'm for bonding. I think if we do it carefully, we don't do it as a permanent thing every 2 years looking at $1 billion or 2, but as a one-time gap filler or opportunity with a revolving line of credit, I think the benefits way outweigh any possible negatives of saying we do bonding. We've got to leverage dollars. We got to run like a business. We can't totally, we aren't a for-profit, but good businesses leverage their dollars, and there's nothing wrong with the state doing the same thing and helping our local partners at the same time.
Thank you, Senator. I want to give the other panelists also an opportunity to respond specifically to the bonding question. But if there are, since we are talking about just sort of general budget priorities, if you do have some local programs, local budget priorities, things that are specific to Cass County or the Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo area that you'd like to highlight as a part of your response to this question, this would be a perfect opportunity to do so. And we'll go next to Senator Roars on that question.
Okay, well, I don't have a specific project that Ron hasn't already talked about, but I have to tell you that I do agree with everything that Ron said, but I look at this a slightly different approach to this. And from a business point of view, typically when we look at a project like of any type, you look at the cost of the project and then you look at the cost to finance the project. Today, we have an opportunity to finance projects at a rate that we have never seen before in the last 20 years. The market is so competitive that if we leverage our resources through bonding, we can do projects today that will, if we delay, will only cost us more money down the road. So today it's a very easy business decision to say, if we can leverage our resources to do the projects today that need to be done, we're going to save money in the long run. So as an example, the Red River Valley Diversion Project, the cost to delay is $70 million per year. That's real money. You can't get it back. If we wait, we pay more for it at the end of the day. If we use our resources, we can leverage our resources to get money at a low interest rate today and the entire state of North Dakota will be better off. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Hansen, I know that your caucus had some thoughts earlier in the year surrounding some potential bonding policy, and so we will direct the conversation over to you to react to the discussion on the table.
Yes. Yes, I absolutely support bonding as a tool for the state to use for infrastructure projects and more. As you mentioned, the Dem-NPL caucus did propose some bonding legislation earlier this year to not only give political subdivisions some certainty with having some dollars for these types of projects, but also to give the construction industry some certainty. We're facing a year of a lot of economic uncertainty. So this could really help secure some of those construction jobs. And as the previous speakers mentioned, it does free up dollars for other important services that the state funds, like K through 12 and human services. Those are two big areas of our budget. And there's a lot of needs in those areas too. So I would just say that I would, during the conversations that happen in the coming session, as we evaluate all the different proposals, that we really think broadly about how we can use these bonding dollars for meeting the needs of our state. Affordable housing is a large need. There's some in the governor's budget allocated toward that, but thinking about what the best return on investment for our dollars would be, in addition to the kind of traditional transportation infrastructure type projects. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Lee, we began the last question with you, and we'll wrap up this question with you.
I agree with much of what's already been said. I support bonding. In fact, I've been in the legislature long enough to remember when we always did that. And then when the oil boom started, I can recall celebrating at the end of the session where we didn't have to do any bonding. So this is not a new deal. It's sort of a return to something that we did before. And we just need to balance this out. Whether we end up with grants or loans, that's one of the differences between the Senate caucus's position and the governor's position. I think all of that really depends on the project. We'll get that worked out. Really, we all work together well in figuring out what we can do with our various tools. And money is a tool. So yes, I agree, it's investing and not spending. And the leveraging is absolutely on target. I look forward to working together with the folks on the call about how we're going to end up with it. But I think it's a very good proposal.
Thank you all for your insights into that bonding proposal and just sort of general budgeting issues. We do want to also cover during the course of this conversation, just as another policy hotspot, the issue of healthcare and things that surround challenges to the healthcare system that are not specifically related to COVID-19. One specific budget proposal or one specific thing that popped out in the governor's budget proposal, and we'll direct this question first to Senator Lee and then move through the panel. As we are focusing on healthcare, the governor has proposed some significant changes to the fee schedule for the state's Medicaid expansion program, pardon me. Is it, in your opinion, is that the right approach for that program? And if not, what would you do differently?
That's more complicated than the original statement, which was true, but I'll give it to you. If you were the doctor and I was the patient and so was Representative Hansen, why would you be paid more to treat me as an expansion patient than you would Representative Hansen as a traditional Medicaid patient? That doesn't seem reasonable at all. However, Medicaid expansion which now has about 22,500 participants, if I remember correctly. That is 90% federally funded and 10% state. I get it, it's all taxpayer money. But traditional Medicaid is 50-50. 50% federal, 50% state. So if we look at what our general fund investment is, if we move that over, it's going to be higher than what we have right now. Medicaid has never before been over 100,000 people, and it is right now. One reason is because we moved the children's health insurance program in, which was a good thing and does not cost us more money. It's a benefit all the way around, reduced administration and all. But I think there's going to be a lot of serious chat about moving Medicaid expansion into traditional Medicaid. because as a result of that, there has been less uncompensated care for all of the hospitals, and both big and small suffer from the amount of uncompensated care. The Hill-Burton Federal Act says any hospital that receives any kind of federal funding for building is obligated to provide care for emergency services to anybody who presents at the facility. So both big and small hospitals are providing care to people who are not insured. And I recall several sessions when someone would in the Senate stand up to promote the idea, which we always accepted, that we had to put 100% general funds into keeping some of the small critical access hospitals open, because otherwise there was no hospital available within a reasonable distance. There is a study group now that's been working on this for about a year. We're looking at what the future of healthcare will look like in North Dakota, and we've made some small steps, but we have more to do. And it's involved with actually a national organization providing some assistance to us. So we won't have it all fixed by this time, but I think that this is going to be a topic that's going to have a lot of discussion in the upcoming session, because it isn't quite as simple as it looks like. The devil is in the details. Let's just leave it there.
Absolutely. And as we are nearing halfway through our allotted time today, I would ask any other panelists if you have additional thoughts on this particular topic before we move on to some other healthcare related conversation points.
Rudy, I can add something.
Sure.
I would just build on the point that Senator Lee made about the less uncompensated care. I think it's been a very important point that Medicaid expansion has helped keep our rural hospitals open and successful. And as we think about how North Dakota attracts families to our state and creates communities that are thriving, we need healthcare to be a part of that equation. People don't want to move to a community where there's not accessible healthcare available to them. And this is a key part of it. So as we have these conversations in the upcoming session, we'll want to make sure that having healthcare available throughout all of our communities, even in rural North Dakota, will be a very important point.
Thank you also, Representative Hansen, for that feedback. Additionally, we did want to move into some conversation that is COVID related, although not specifically healthcare related. It has to do with the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many small businesses are obviously struggling as a result of that. Some industries more than others, such as the hospitality industry, which is experiencing the worst crisis in living memory in North Dakota within that industry anyway. The state has committed $62 million in CARES Act dollars to some economic resiliency grants specifically for that industry, and some larger dollar amounts to broader economic resiliency grants that cross all industries in order to provide some support and stability during this time, although long-term stability is still a concern. Start with Senator Sorvag here. Do you see a role for the state government and the legislature in helping ensure the long-term viability of this industry and other small businesses? And if so, what would that be?
I think the state needs to stay involved where they can. Obviously, we don't have the resources that the federal government does. And as we talk, all of the care dollars that we have pushed in there, actually, we've just moved federal dollars around. But I think we need to look for little things. I mean, I'm not in hospitality, but I'm in the small retail. I know what this COVID did. And I hope people keep in mind, whether you're in the retail, hospitality, or any other business affected, this wasn't bad business decisions. This wasn't misreading business where it's going to come from, how it did. This was the government that shut us down or shut our customer base down. So normally I'm kind of let every man stand for himself type business mentality, but not in this situation. I think we're going to be a little limited as a state. I hope the federal step more, but I think we need to look at little things. And I don't have specific, but I'll use an example, what the city commission just voted in Fargo. It doesn't seem like much. Take the utility bills out, help a little bit, but every little piece helps. And if you're one of these small businesses struggling to pay your bills, every piece, I've got to commend Fargo City Commission what they stepped forward and do. And it was a great idea. It's not very big, but it all will help a little bit, forgoing some fees. And that's really, I hope the state does that. We have looked at it a little bit. There's been dollars to the bank for interest forgiveness, doesn't apply to all. I think we need to stay open, but I hope we look at that. This idea, I don't think there's a big picture nor the resources where we're going to come and write everybody some big check. And I don't think we should. But I think we need to look at opportunities, especially for the real small businesses. How can we keep their heads above water? There is a light at the end of the tunnel now with the vaccine, but it's still quite a few months off. And after 9 months of battling this, there's still a long ways to go if you're the one that's paying your bill every day. So do I have really specific ideas? No, but I hope we keep our minds open as we go forward. Now we'll know a little bit more where we are. And we got to look at little things. But if it's going to be big help, then the feds need to, they need to do their job and step up and go to work and figure out something, because this is different. As I said before, this isn't mistakes by the business. This was government shutting down your customer base. So I hope we can be open-minded to every opportunities out there that we can afford.
Thank you, Senator. And interested in other panelists' thoughts. Senator Roars, do you have thoughts on the small business impact of the pandemic and how the state can address it?
You know, absolutely, I do. And I couldn't agree with Ron more on the fact that there's so many different businesses affected in different ways that there's no one size fits all solution here. You talked about the hospitality industry, but you have to also think about the restaurant industry has been devastated, and a host of others have been devastated. As we have negotiated through this whole process of COVID here, I have looked at every one of these things, and it's really one of those things we have to be careful that we don't suffer from a death from 1,000 cuts. So in other words, we got to look at things very incrementally and deal with them on a small level and try to bring relief right where it's needed. And the PPP was one of the best examples I could think of during this whole COVID process, where the government provided relief to us employers that we saw immediate results from. And whoever came up with PPP needs to be commended for that effort, because it worked, and it worked immediately. We as legislators here in the state of North Dakota got to look for similar ways to be able to provide relief in small, meaningful ways.
Thank you, Senator. And would leave that question open before we move on. We do have some specific questions for individual members of the panel, although of course everyone is welcome to wade in on any given question that I ask, but submitted through some conversations with chamber membership during preparation for this event. So before we move on to that, I would just leave the question on the table open if Representative Hansen or Senator Lee, if you have any input on the impact on small businesses from the pandemic. And then we'll move on to the next sort of topic area.
I agree with what's been said. I won't add any more.
Thank you, Senator.
Same.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. So as I mentioned, we do have some specific questions that came in through conversations in preparation for this event with our chamber membership. Again, membership that is viewing or listening, if you do have questions, just use that chat feature at the bottom of your screen to submit those. I think we'll switch gears and go to Representative Hansen for the first question in this section, which Representative Hansen, as we shift kind of the focus here, a big topic of conversation within your caucus and publicly has been paid family leave. What are the top priorities in this area for the upcoming session or the next 2 years? And how do you believe the legislature should best address that issue?
Sure. Well, especially during the last year, during the pandemic, we've heard a lot of discussion in the public about the need for paid family leave as families face a lot of pressure with more at-home learning or more flexibility with their work. But the need for paid family leave existed before the pandemic, and once the pandemic subsides, it will continue to be a need with families. There are too many North Dakotans that face the difficult choice of either having to continue to work to get a paycheck or caring for themselves or for a family member, such as in a big family event like the arrival of a child or maybe an elderly parent is ill and you need to take care of them. So there's a big need with North Dakotans. There's quite a few North Dakotans that actually can't even earn a single sick day from their employers. So that need exists as well. The Family Medical Leave Act, as many people know, provides the ability to have a guaranteed job, unpaid time away from your job, but a lot of families can't afford to take unpaid time. So what a paid family leave proposal could do is create a state facilitated program where the employer and the employee pay into a pool of dollars that can be then used to pull from when that employee has a need for to take a leave from the job, such as the example of the birth or adoption of a child, or your spouse or your parent is fighting cancer and you need to be with them during their last days, for example. So it wouldn't be necessarily state funded, but rather state facilitated. We proposed this originally in 2019, but we're refining it for 2021 to maximize the benefit to families, but also making sure that it's appealing to employers. One thing that I hear a lot from employers is that small entrepreneurs or small companies can't always compete with big corporations. I'll use Microsoft as an example because I used to work there, because they're a smaller company. They can't always offer the Cadillac level of compensation and benefits as the big companies do. So by participating in a state facilitated pool with other small companies, for example, they're able to compete for talent along with the big companies. They've leveled the playing field, if you will. It could also allow North Dakota to have a competitive differentiator in attracting young talent, young families to our state, because we would offer something that the surrounding states aren't offering. And it helps businesses retain their talent. They don't have to lose them because of this kind of big medical event and then have to retrain in new employees. They can just temporarily put a pause on that employment. So that's what we're looking at, is kind of a modified version of what we proposed in 2019, so that it can be a win for families and a win for businesses.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. Would just open that up to the group for any additional commentary on that particular topic.
I have a quick comment, if I may, Rudy, and
Sure.
that is that we understand the challenges that come about for families. Many of us know or have people in our own families who deal with it. I personally have a struggle with the idea that the state is going to do something better than what the businesses and employees privately can do. I'm willing to talk about anything, and if that bill moves forward, it's likely to be ending up in the Human Services Committee, so we'll be seeing it. And I'm not coming into it with a closed mind, but I have to say that I just really struggle with the priorities we have right now and the challenges we have in meeting a budget. I recognize the proposal mentioned is money from employers and employees, but how much more can we take out of both of those pockets before those pockets are looking only half full? So we're open to discussion, but I'm not convinced, but I'm willing to listen.
Rudy, Senator Rohr's here, if I could.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, so as an employer of quite a few people, one of the things that I would say this kind of falls in the category of PTO and healthcare benefits as a benefit that employers can provide for employees. And in our world, it hasn't moved up the ladder of importance enough to outweigh some of the other benefits that employees want, such as healthcare, paid time off, paid vacations, and so forth. So I don't see this being an across the board need that's being expressed by multitudes of employees. The other issue of affordability, can you afford to pay for these decisions that are family decisions, personal decisions that affect the company? And that's where I've got the biggest hang up is the fact that this is a family decision to have a child or to take a vacation or whatever. We should not, as a business, as an industry, be expected to share the burden of that decision. Now, the other thing that I would point out that kind of got brought to a head here through the COVID pandemic, and that is the real need within our organization. I'll speak only. 28% of our employees have dependents that are child in elementary school and younger. That became very, very important to us because those are the people that constantly were being quarantined because of the kids being in and out of school, contracting COVID, and having family members having to stay home to take care of them. And so as much as you think that there's a tremendous amount of pressure for families, it's a smaller percentage than you might expect. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And staying on that theme of sort of workforce related challenges that maybe weren't created by the pandemic, but in certain cases have definitely been exacerbated by it. It came up during yesterday's panel discussion that once COVID has sort of become less of a day-to-day concern for all of us, and again, all of our fingers are crossed that that happens sooner rather than later, there will remain some original issues within the North Dakota economy that haven't gone away and potentially have even gotten worse. First among those is likely our workforce shortage and our need for a more highly trained workforce. There's been a lot of discussion about attraction and retention of members of that workforce, and then also the roles that the state's education systems, both K through 12 and higher ed, can play and should play in helping the state solve that problem. So I'm interested in the panel's thoughts on that. It's obviously a very broad question, but particularly important to our region, obviously, with the higher ed capacity and our excellent K through 12 system that we have here. So maybe I will send that over to Senator Sorvag first, and we will move from there. But how can the state do better in helping solve that problem, particularly as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think, obviously the Workforce Academy is an easy answer to say. It's not easy to get it built, but I think in all that, the state just needs to, I think, first of all, keep encouraging and investing in things that provide good paying jobs and provide opportunities to move up. And then when we do that, we need to, whether it's through CTE, education, higher ed, however we do, we got to be willing to invest in training the workforce to do those jobs. So they go hand in hand. And I think a lot of it needs to be public-private partnership. I'm a strong believer of that on a lot of things. That's why I like the Workforce Academy. I think that's been working towards that. That's where the bonding bill, both bonding bills have money in it for the Workforce Academies around the state. So I just think we need to continue to look at opportunities. We not only have to invest in providing new businesses, new opportunities, but we have to really provide in our workforce. And education is not something that I sit on, but I've always been supportive and I will. And I think retraining our present workforce is a big deal. And that's where the more we can do in our community to allow them to go part-time, to get the skills, to keep getting those opportunities, I think will be a better deal. So yeah, we got to be a player, we got to be an investor, and we got to let the ideas drive both, not only from the educational end, but let the employer end or the employees of the business world show us their needs. How do we partner up and how do we get there? And we've got to quit talking about a lot of it. And we just got to start doing it.
Thank you, Senator. One other area that has been highlighted sort of both through the workforce conversation, just through a general capacity conversation, obviously is the healthcare industry throughout 2020 and in this pandemic situation. Particularly, obviously, there's a workforce shortage in the healthcare industry. There's also a capacity shortage in certain areas and in certain particular parts of that industry. Particularly, I think, and the question has come in that some light has been shined on particularly the long-term care industry and the struggles that particular population, and both that live there and that work there, have gone through in a pandemic scenario. And so I will direct this one back towards Senator Lee. Do you see a specific role that the state can play or a specific program that has crossed your desk, or how are we best going to address those issues and help that agency, or that, pardon me, that industry return to normalcy as rapidly as possible?
COVID, as you know, has had a detrimental effect in so many ways, not only losing workers who are sick, but the impact on the people who live there. Before I forget, I'm going to say that administrators, long-term care association, the families, many different people have been involved in a couple different areas. One is developing a new reimbursement plan, which I do hope will be seen positively by the legislature. And it is something that is going to replace a system that is not sustainable, according to everybody who works with it. So that's one area. But another area that there have been a lot of people working on is how do we deal with the visitation? I think it's really important. I think it's terrible. I mean, it's just terrible that people have to have been kept isolated for this length of time. I also understand why it's being done, because they are vulnerable, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be in a nursing home facility in the first place. And so it's really a challenge for everyone who has someone they care about that's in a senior facility. However, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, which is part of the federal government, of course, they established the rules. And when our numbers went way up for COVID positive tests, that pretty much shut down the little beginning that we had on visitation. So now we're going in the right direction. We've got a ways to go yet. And of course, it's way too cold for outdoor visitation like we had before. But believe me, there are people working on this every day in one way or another. And there are people communicating about it all the time. And I'm not the only one who has gotten hundreds of emails from people who are really stressed out about people in their families who have had so little exposure to their loved ones when they're living in a facility or in the hospital also. So it's a challenging thing that is happening. The light in the tunnel really, as has been said so many times today, is the availability of the vaccine. If they can get to those staff members quickly, because there's some community spread that comes from the fact that staff members are around, the residents aren't going anywhere, they're not bringing it in. So how can we do the best way that we can move forward in order to allow more visitation? And we have, I might add, among the most highly staffed and highest rated nursing home facilities in the country. We can talk about that some other time when you got more time. So we have good people working in good places with good amounts of staff, and good people who live there who need that kind of care. And it's been a critical issue for them. I can't fix it overnight, but the vaccine is going to be a big help.
Thank you, Senator. I would leave that question open for other panelists that may have thoughts before we kind of move into, we are down to 12 minutes left. So we're going to move into a little more potentially rapid fire series of questions. I know there are some that folks really want to.
Rudy, if I could quickly address some of the workforce issues, could I please?
Yes, please do.
So Ron did touch on the academy and the importance of that for our vocational training and skills training opportunities. And we could spend a host of time talking about that, but I think it's been fairly well touched on already. But one of the things that we circle around is higher education and the value proposition it is to the workforce needs in North Dakota. And I know that here on the eastern part of the state, we depend a tremendous amount on Minnesota students. Now, that's important, and that's very important to fulfilling the workforce needs that we have in North Dakota. I've got some numbers here for NDSU, and I'm sure they're very similar for UND. And that is that 50% of our students at NDSU are from our non-resident students. 90% of those 90 non-resident students come from Minnesota. And of those students, 60% of them take their first job in North Dakota. So if you do the math, that's about 4,000 people, employees per year that come to our state from Minnesota alone. And so if you extrapolate that out over 10 years, there's 40,000 people we inherit every 10 years in our workforce. There is no recruiting tool that we know of in the state of North Dakota that is more responsive than our higher education system. So that is something I think that we got to keep our eye on. We got to keep pushing forward. One of the other things that can bolster all of that is the fact that we invest more money into our research programs and allow those programs to develop into new business opportunities for our state. So thank you. I just wanted to add that to some of the comments.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator. As we move on through some other questions, again, we are kind of running low on time, so I apologize for pushing the conversation along. Anyone feel free to jump in if you feel I've cut you short. One other budgetary question that folks are hoping that we get into is that in addition to what we've already covered in terms of bonding and local spending priorities, the state of North Dakota does have numerous other funds at its disposal, including the Legacy Fund, including the Strategic Investment and Improvements Fund, or some folks would know that as SIF. Does have money put away in several other funds that don't involve bonding and are not the Legacy Fund, although feel free to touch on the Legacy Fund in your answer if you'd like. What role do the panelists see on in moving those funds or utilizing those funds that we have existing within the state government to when it comes to building our budget priorities, both locally and across the state in this upcoming session? And maybe we'll start there with Senator Sorvag.
Well, you know, there is quite a few funds. Some are available, some aren't. But a legacy fund, I mean, I think everybody knows about the legacy fund. And I can only talk my personal opinion, but I'm opposed to any discussion of touching the principal. I don't see any reason for it, but I am an advocate of using the earnings. It's what do we use the earnings for and how do we use them? That's a major part of the discussion. And those funds will be coming available at the end of each biennium. They're not, so if we budget them, we got to kind of wait until now coming up this June 30th is when we'll have the earnings from before. But if you touch on some of the other ones, you know, the budget stabilization fund, we took it up to 15% because after the last turn down, we had used it so much. Well, we can crank that back to 10% of the general fund if we think it's adequate, you know, protection. There's funds freed there. But in the strategic investment fund, that's money that doesn't sit there year after year. When you look at property tax relief, general fund that we do out of oil revenue, all of that items are getting funded till the money gets to the strategic investment. And all that is the end of the road bucket. That's what's left after we've funded everything with oil. This time, you know, I think the governor's projection in the next year is a 54 million or next biennium. There was originally, I think we had 96, very potentially could be a couple hundred. But that's money we've always budgeted. It's cash in the bank. It gets spent the next biennium, and it's usually infrastructure. Was going out west. The prairie dog bill you all heard about, that's all money that caught in those budgets before it got to the SIF fund. So SIF isn't something we've been sitting on piling money. It's just we spend that as cash when we have in the bank. And it's a little bit what's being looked at the legacy. So I think we need to tap those resources. You know, a lot of these other ones, Common School Trust, nobody wants to touch that. That's been there constitutionally for a long time. We do use the earnings. So we got to be careful. And on the legacy going back, you know, if we start tapping the principal, then we no longer have a legacy fund. We'll have an empty fund. So I hope we're responsible, but there's a difference in earnings. It's a difference in the funds. And a lot of them get used. They just coming in on the backside. And that's something that bonding, and we're looking at water. It's one of the discussions. Instead of spending money that we anticipate and getting it all out of whack like happened this biennium, do we need to move to that using lines of credit and stuff? So when we say we budgeted 400 million, it's actually 400 million of cash. So just because the money sits there for a year doesn't mean we're hoarding it. It's just being responsibly used. So I think we look at them all.
Thank you, Senator. And we are running a little low on time. We do have 5 minutes left in the conversation, so I want to make sure that anyone who would like an opportunity to answer this question has the ability to do so before we wrap up. So
this is Judy Lee, if I may, Rudy. In 2019, that fund had $764 million, and oil was at over $50 a barrel, and we were pumping between 1.4 and 1.5 million barrels a day. 2021, no, we got about 300 million that we're expecting in the SIF fund because of that reduced oil price impact. So that's a $464 million gap to fill if we look at what the budget was last time. And we have a plan in how that's going to be done. There will be turned back from budgets because COVID has had an impact in a lot of areas. And so not all of the money has been spent in some of those areas. So about 300 million should be able to come from turn back. Legacy fund earnings, which are already in the bank, as Senator Sorvag just said, from the 1921 biennium will be used for part of that. And the budget stabilization fund really is our rainy day fund. And it's full right now. As Ron said, we've gone to 15% of general fund spending, and it's full at 726 million. So we have the money to make good decisions. And we're not going to provide any destitute budget entries. We're going to do our best to make priority decisions that are proper, but we just need to be sensible about it. And I totally agree with not using anything in the legacy fund other than earnings. And we're going to be deciding how much of that to use. So just to pass along some numbers.
Thank you, Senator Lee. And I'd like to, as we are kind of rounding the bend into the end of our time here, I'd like to ask Representative Hansen and Senator Rohrs if you have thoughts on this kind of what is turning out to be the final question in that order. Representative Hansen?
Sure. When I think about what I hear from my constituents after this year, I often do hear, why aren't we using the principle of the legacy fund? Because if there ever was a rainy day, this year certainly should qualify. However, I would agree with the previous speakers that there's probably not a lot of appetite among our colleagues to tap into the principle. So we'll need to have some robust conversations about how best to use the earnings. The governor proposed, as everyone knows, a variety of uses for the earnings. There's quite a few good ideas there. One that I want to spend a minute on is the creation of a research fund for our research universities. I think that's a great opportunity to help diversify our economy, really help by diversifying our economy will maybe help avoid some volatile ups and downs with our revenue as a state. And it also brings jobs and extra dollars to our state because those research dollars could be matched by either federal dollars or private foundation dollars or private industry dollars. Senator Sorvag was the prime sponsor on that bill in 2019, and I hope we can get some good momentum on kind of a revised version of that in 2021. Thank you.
So I'll close, Rudy, by just saying that my feeling on the legacy fund is that it frankly belongs to the future generations as well as it does us. And for that reason, I have no interest whatsoever in ever spending any of the legacy fund itself. However, the earnings of the fund, it would behoove us to make wise investments on behalf of the state of North Dakota to continue to grow that fund in an exponential manner. And so by doing that, we would prove to be good stewards of the revenues, of the resources of the legacy fund. And so I too am one that is not interested in tapping into the balance, but I'm very interested in using the interest to forward the state of North Dakota.
Thank you, Senator. And unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time today. I wish this conversation could go on for another hour, although maybe not all of our panelists do. I would like to thank all of our panelists, Senators Lee, Sorvag, and Rohrs, and Representative Hansen for joining us today. Would also like to thank the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber for the opportunity to sponsor and co-host this event along with them. I would like to remind everyone who's watching to join us tomorrow as we talk with legislative leaders from the other side of the river over in Minnesota. And also be sure to tune in on Thursday for our panel with federal policymakers at 2 p.m. More information on those panels, including all panelists and times, can be found on the Chamber's website under events. Thank you all. Thank you again to the panelists and all of our viewers for participating today, and have a great rest of your day.